This week on the BackTable podcast.
The leadership of SIR should have guidelines as to what it means to be an interventionalist. I think that is within the realm of appropriate. I suspect the separation is not going to come from a mandate or a dictum from SIR. I think it's going to be an organic growth where at a local level, groups are going to say, you know what, we're different specialties. This isn't working. And it's going to come not from IR or just DR, it's going to come from both. Or it's going to come from the hospital, or it's going to come from the private equity group that runs them. It's like, why are we bother with X when we can only, bother with Y? And I think that is going to be a change from within. And it's almost like a revolution, not to be too dramatic, but I think the people or the entities are going to decide, and then the leadership is going to be there to support. But I don't think SIR or ABR or ACR is going to say, oh, we're separate. It's going to be an internal growth and change that's dictated by local politics, and local becomes citywide, citywide becomes statewide, statewide becomes regional wide, and so forth and so on.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the BackTable podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Baheti. I'm an interventional radiologist in Tacoma, Washington. I have two super awesome guests coming on the show today. We have Dr. Mark Lessne. He's the VIR at Vascular Interventional Specialist of Charlotte Radiology, and he's the private practice counselor of SIR. We also have Dr. Saher Sabri. He is a mentor of mine. He's also the chief of interventional radiology at MedStar Health and MedStar Georgetown University Hospital, and he's the president-elect of SIR. Thank you guys for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so the topic of our podcast today is going to be, what does the future hold for the IR-DR relationship? And it's really special, actually, that we have two representatives from SIR who are on to talk about this, because I think you guys have a unique perspective compared to a lot of private practice doctors. So yeah, let's get it started. So Saher, when did you first start to hear about rumblings that, this was going to be an issue? IR-DR should stay together or separate?
I mean, the minute we had our own, specialty recognized and we started having our own residency, we knew this was going to come up. And, as, the whole planning for the specialty, the IR exams and all these things were happening, and the first proposal was to have a primary IR specialty. That was the very first proposal, which was turned down by ABMS. And then eventually what we settled on was an IR-DR. And this is what we're dealing with now. And we knew at some point these discussions we're gonna have and dive into. It's like, how do we deal with the relationship? What's happening lately with DR and the changes in DR, just making this come to a head. So a lot of discussions about this anywhere on social media. If you talk to your fellows, talk to your residents, talk to your mentees, your mentors, everyone is talking about it. And the practices are diverge. There's a lot of divergence going on. So yeah, we definitely have to talk about it. But definitely started when a decision was made for the certificate for the IR specialty to be an IR-DR. Once that happened, now we're, joined at the hip till we find a way to do something different and, untie it somehow, somewhere.
Oh, man. Yeah. It feels like we're in this big mess, this big tangle. We're not going to be able to detangle easily or simply. And is it even good for us to separate? I think that's really the question. Mark, you have a really interesting practice in Charlotte. I'm sure there were struggles kind of separating yourself from the diagnostic guys. For those who don't know you, can you give a little bit of background?
Yeah. So I've been in Charlotte in a non-university affiliated practice, although I can't say that anymore because we're now associated with Wake Forest. However, I started my career in an academic center, spent a few years there, and then switched to this practice about 10 years ago. What's interesting about my practice, which sort of slants my view a little bit, is that we are the de facto academic center here. Charlotte's the largest city in the country that doesn't have an academic university. And so we're the transplant center and trauma center and all that. So it gives me a little bit of a different viewpoint. But I think what's interesting is, when you said we have unique viewpoints, I think this entire topic is ripe for the mistake of myopia. And so I think we have to be careful that, just the leaders have one viewpoint, but there's tons of viewpoints out there throughout the country. And I think we got to work hard to sort of make sure we're not minimizing people in different positions who don't have, the vocal ability yet because of a leadership position.
You look like you want to say something, Saher. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to add about the different practice patterns and the whole idea about being together, separating and such. What's nice about IR is there's so many ways you can practice, right? We have the, pure IRs in academic, that we see. And then you go into hospital employed IRs, which, I happen to employ a lot of IRs who are not part of the, academic practice per se, but they're, employed by, my hospital. I'm part of, MedStar Health and we have 23 IRs. Many of them are in community hospitals, not necessarily part of the, academic, like teaching and research and such. Some are, and a big part are not. They're hospital employed IRs. They do 100% IR. And then you, of course, you have the ones who have independent IR practice groups. There are, there's several really successful models and, OBLs, of course. And now we're seeing more and more of that. I just talking to, a lot of, again, my former fellows and mentees and how they, ventured in that, and a lot of success stories and some difficulties, of course, but, many success stories. And then you have the biggest part, which is part of the DR group and having to carve out their time for IR. And that is the group that is, has a lot of issues, I would say. And there are definitely issues in the other settings, in the hospital-based setting and in the, academic department because of the ties to DR and being under that service line. So, but probably the biggest issue is the IRs who are part of a DR practice group. So, we can talk a lot about this, but I'm going to just go back to Mark, if you don't mind, Ali, just let me, play the, the one who asked questions. Is like, with the way your practice was, because you're part of a big DR group, but you managed to kind of have a distinct name. Do you govern yourself, somewhat separately as an IR? You're still part of a DR group, and do you do diagnostic or just IR? How is that working?
To finish Ali's sort of initial question, so I'm part of this large IR-DR group. We have something like 100 physicians, of which 17 or 18, I think, are IRs. And my practice, again, sort of covering the major academic hospital here, is sort of what I think a lot of people would want in IR. It's sort of this advanced and sophisticated as anything I ever did at my academic center. But at the end of the day, I am beholden to a DR group. And so, 95% of my practice is IR. But once or twice a month, I have to go off service and read just, body CTs or something like that, or ultrasound. That said, my practice is unique in the sense, I think, in the sense that we have that, but I also have, research coordinator, and we have multiple clinical trials.
So your DR shifts are totally separate. You're not reading between cases.
Correct. Yeah. The only thing we do in between cases is we'll do vascular imaging. So runoffs and CTAs and, plain films maybe, but no diagnostic responsibility in between cases. About a few years ago, we had, and we still have, a very robust clinic, but most of my partners were doing clinic sort of in between cases. And so even though we had clinic for 20 years here and have, a very large volume, they were doing in between cases. And sort of when I got here and grew my practice, my volume is just such that's not feasible. And so I have a dedicated clinic. But right now, there's only about there's two sections. We're a North and South division. There's only me in my Southern division who has a dedicated clinic day, whereas everyone else sees a ton of clinic patients. They can see, 8 to 10 clinic patients a day, but in between cases, which not feasible. I'll see 15 or 17 in half a day. And so you can't do that in between cases. So that said, I recognize that there are other practices that are very different. And I think Saher and I talked a little bit about this. What defines an IR, right? I think that's what we have to talk about. What makes you an IR? If you do one tube exchange every 7 months, and then the rest is mammography and neuroimaging, are you an interventionalist? I've had some body radiologists who call themselves interventional radiologists because they do drains. Is that an interventional radiologist? I think that is sort of where we need to start with this topic.
Yeah, and is it like a self-defined thing? Like, I identify as an IR, therefore I am an IR? Or are there qualifications, like from our society, for example, about case volumes, things like that? Do you have to be board certified to be an IR?
Do you have to follow your patients?
Yeah, this is awesome. This is one of my, favorite things to talk about because, listen, you have to be, trained in IR. You have to have, training, residency, IR residency, or in the past IR fellowship to be an IR. I think that is at least the minimum requisite. Now, what happens, a lot of people do that, then they just, after some point, stop practicing IR, and just do mostly radiology. And then, they do very, light procedures. And not to minimize any procedure that is done, but it's, no, high-end IR and things that could be done by a lot of diagnostic radiologists. So as SIR, membership is, you don't have to be an IR to be a member, by the way, you can be a vascular surgeon to be a member. So membership is something. But then when you say SIR, do you want to serve the membership? One of the, missions of IR is to support IRs, wherever they practice. But what is our focus? Is to focus on IRs who want to build a clinical longitudinal practice. That is the focus where most of the efforts of SIR is going to move on in the future, because we think that is the future of IR. Everyone is welcome to be a member. Everyone is welcome to attend the annual meeting. But where we're going to dedicate our resources is to dedicate for people who are committed to the specialty the way we think the specialty should be practiced, which what Mark just mentioned, having his own clinic, seeing 16, 17 patients, is the way IR should be practiced. And this is where we want to be. If you want to be a separate specialty, we need to be, all the things that we talked about, clinically savvy and own the patient issue and, experience from start to finish and speak at the same level with our, referring colleagues. And at the same time, be financially savvy, be aware of, the billing and coding and how to manage how to manage a business. All these things that all our colleagues do, on a routine basis. You cannot just hide behind your diagnostic radiology group and just go do whatever's on the list and leave, and then expect to be, I want to be an independent specialty. So there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So our focus is going to be that group of IR who really want to take it to the next level and provide clinical longitudinal care are the ones that we want to focus on. And we're working on a strategic plan now. It's going to be coming out soon, but one of the goals is to increase the percentage of the membership who practice in such a way.
So let me ask, why do you think an IR who does an IR residency doesn't practice like that? And the reason I ask that is because, I appreciate that resources are limited, and so we need to figure out where are we going to put them. However, my heart does go out to the person in rural Montana who is an IR trained, they went into a residency, they're in a 5-person group, let's say, and they say, there's no way I can function like that. And if I get an yttrium case every month, that's one more than my practice was doing before I got here. And so shouldn't I get some support for that? And I'm playing that devil's advocate a little bit because I don't know the answer to that. How do we address those people?
Absolutely. We have a small practice and rural IR committee, and there's a lot of support that goes to such practice because it's hard to do, 100% IR. You have to do, things in between, whether doing diagnostic or doing even breast, biopsies and things like this. So the practice, pattern is different, and definitely they should be supported. And that group, for sure, we have resources for them to kind of help them with that practice. But still, the overwhelming majority do not practice in the rural areas. You still have if you look at where the practice, if you just look at the map and where IRs is like most other specialties, it's not unique to us. Everything is concentrated in large populations live, and that's the nature of it. So yeah, you still have people living in large urban population who choose to do very little IR after completing an IR fellowship, which is great. That's up to you.
But let's talk about the reasons for that. And I don't think it's all based on the individual interventional radiologists. I'm speaking from my own experience and speaking from the experience of a lot of young, feisty IRs, who came out, they're gunners, they want to build this awesome practice. I think the problem is understanding who the stakeholders are, right? So you have your diagnostic group, and your diagnostic group, you make way more money for your diagnostic group, sitting at a desk reading CT scans than doing cases. I can do a 3-hour iliocable reconstruction, and that is seen as money lost from my group, right? Because I'm not sitting in front of a computer reading MRIs. So that is, you get pressure from your diagnostic guys. SIR has doesn't have influence over the diagnostic radiology group, really, right? You can't control that. Okay, you get pressure from your hospital administrators. We got to get these tunnel lines placed so these guys can get sent to the nursing home, all right? Oh yeah, your day is filled with tunnel lines, so you don't have time to do a case that takes 2 hours. Sorry, that's just not going to work, And also like financially reimbursement, if you're getting paid the pro fees, like it doesn't help your group either if you're just doing those long cases. So then you got the stakeholders from the hospital administration. Oh, and by the way, all the like good leg cases, yeah, our hospital has employed vascular surgeons. So we want to really feed them because they're the employed guys and they're paid per RVU. So yeah, you can't do any of those. So then you're just kind of like, I want to do all this stuff. I'm trying to do all this stuff. I want to build it. I can't build the volume necessary to like keep my skills up over 5 or 6 years. Okay, yeah, it's way easier to just sit at home and do diagnostic radiology in my pajamas and get paid like 2 to 3x what I would be doing hustling and grinding as an IR doctor. And that's when people kind of start to see like OBL's ASCs or doing locums or opportunities where they're not necessarily like have to buy in totally into the infrastructure issues that surround medicine and that cannot be fixed by a single individual and start to focus on these other practice patterns. And I think that's like the group, maybe like the loud minority that you're hearing from a lot on social media, right? Of people who are pretty disgruntled with kind of administration and our leadership's response.
So, I think obviously you hit on many major topics well. I think the truth is I and we have an answer to every single one of those, okay? And I'm not going to go through all of them, but the first one you said, I can make way more money as a diagnostic than an IR for my group. I think that's a narrative that I'm not sure I buy all the time. I'm sure it's true in some settings. However, I will say the following. There's lies, damn lies, and then statistics. And then there's RVUs and reimbursement. And so when the diagnostic radiologists say, oh, reading imaging is going to be so much more lucrative, I think the response should be, well, show me the reimbursement, right? Because how many are DRGs? How many of those scans are you never getting reimbursed for? Not only that, but what is the technical, you're giving the technical fee away to the hospital, right? And so the hospital, in many practices, you're just getting the pro fees. And so the hospital is making a fortune on the IRs, right? And so when they say, oh, we subsidize IR, the truth is, well, the hospital probably, and again, you have to figure out diplomatic ways of saying this, the hospital probably values us potentially more than diagnostic, or at least as much, both financially and in terms of a service line, especially a replaceable service line. The problem is, when I say you have solutions to every single one of those problems, it takes time, energy, and partnership, right? And I think this is what I was talking about with a little bit of ivory tower or high horse sort of attitudes that we, and myself included, have to avoid, which is some people don't have the energy. Some people don't have the partners. And so, yes, I built, practice, or she built this practice, or she, but you get help along the way, and you have a home life that's stable, and you have your stresses at home maybe are conducive to that. There's a lot of people who are like, look, it's easier for me to re-diagnose. I could do it, and I've got the skill set, but why should I have to fight this fight? And I think that is a tough place to be in when you have the will, but not the resources.
And that would be an awesome place to focus on, try and build for those type of people.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate everything you said, Ali. And again, several of my former fellows and residents, we talk about this all the time, and they went through exactly what you described. The financial model for IR is sustainable. We know that you can have a successful IR practice and get paid decent. Now, being partner with a diagnostic group that, depending how size it is, there's some amount of money you may not be able to get to do an IR, but some who manage to get to do this part of IR only practice. So the practice model for IR works. And a lot of it has to do with going beyond just the RVUs and going further into the getting any, we call it subsidies or partnership on the, technical fees. I mean, this is something that we work so hard on, to build this practice and to get what you talked about, all these lines, all the stuff that needs to come out, and you need to help with length of stay, and you need to do all these procedures that not glorious, but they're helping the hospital and they're helping their bottom line. So getting some agreement with the hospital on this component is, I'm not saying an easy thing. I mean, there's a lot of, we had a ACIR meeting, the Chiefs and IR meeting, which had academic and private groups talking about exactly this, and how can you move beyond an RVU model and be judged by just that into sharing into the technical fees that can help you with the practice. Yeah, it takes leadership, it takes time, and it's hard for one person in a DR group to do this. It's not going to happen. So strength comes in numbers. I think that it has to be, for this model to be successful, it has to be a strong IR group in a DR group, for example, the Charlotte example, or an IR only group. Now you go into the pseudo-exclusive contracts and how we going to, pry away these hospitals out of that. Or you do your own process, which is an ASC or an OBL, or it be hospital-based employment. And the hospital-based employment is, it's not unique to us. Talk to every specialty out there. They're all dealing with this thing. It's hard to maintain a practice. Physician-owned practices are just, whittling away. Everything is owned by, venture capitalists now. VCs just, owning that. And the others, they're just being bought by the hospital. So it's really hard to stay in that model. The DR kept it at this point, although a lot of them are, of course, joined VCs, as you know. But that could be the best thing is to join hospital-based practices. You'd be salaried with incentives, for example. It's a very good setup. But I can tell you, for every time you try to recruit for a practice like this, somebody will say, or will leave you, or say, it's like, no, I want to go join a DR group, read only 20%, to do 20% IR and get paid more. It's right there. The practice pattern that we're talking about with clinic, with resources and all that stuff is available, is there to practice. And it's still a personal choice. And I'm not, blaming anyone or just, this is all, whatever is best for you. I support you fully. And, and I talked to several of my, former partners and such. I fully support them with the decision you make. I think this is great. Whatever works for you and your family, I support you fully. But the model of practicing 100% IR with clinic outside of academic centers is there, and it can be valuable. I think people need to learn how to be, go back to it, how to be more financially savvy, how to learn the business of IR, how to know the revenue cycle management, the front end and the back end. We just had a revenue cycle management meeting, which a lot of people attended, and it was fantastic. SIR put it together. Just had a lot of business leaders, CEO of hospitals, experts in, reimbursement, and billing and coding and pre-authorization, all as such, and marketing, and these are things. Business Institute is happening at SIR as well. All these things, I think you need to kind of build that, which we don't get trained in residency, unfortunately, as much as you try to. You need to build that into the IR community to get stronger about it, and then you have to come together. One person trying to do this in a practice is not going to be helpful. I don't know, Mark, what do you say?
Everything you say is absolutely correct. But man, it sounds like work. And the problem is, just being realistic here, right? The average human being, even the average physician, regardless of all the training, is just tired and doesn't want to do. And I know, I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but life is hard, okay, especially now. And to say, I'm starting a new practice, I got to build this practice. I also have to learn about revenue cycle management. I've never heard those words before in my life. I need to figure out how to negotiate contracts. I think one of the jobs of SIR is we have to make that process easier. The other thing is, IR has a culture problem, right? I cannot, and correct me if I'm wrong, I can't think of another specialty whose retirement plan or backup plan is another specialty, right?
Yeah.
Like my wife, the gastroenterologist, I have never heard her say, oh, God forbid I get arthritis and I can't scope, I'm going to be a hospitalist. That's not a thing that they talk about. Just like she can make a ton more money just doing endoscopy, but she has days of clinic. Why? Because she's a gastroenterologist. Of course you have clinic. We have never in IR reached the point of, I can make more money just doing procedures or reading films, but I got to have clinic. Why? Because I'm an interventionalist. That just hasn't happened for us. And I don't know how to make that transition because there are people with back pain. There are people who have arthritis. There are people who are like, you know what? I'm going to do this for 15 years and then I'm going to go read films the rest of the time. How do we counter that? And again, I think there's answers. We just have to disseminate it and make it easier.
I'll add to this. Again, the IRDR certificate is a blessing and a curse. It is for a lot of people. It's like, this is the best thing that could happen to me. I can have 2 careers. I can switch back and forth whenever I need to. What's better than this? One of my mentors once told me, never lose a skill you worked so hard to gain. And it's like, well, if I worked so hard on something, I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to switch whenever it is. I'm just trying to build my OBL now. It's not working. I'll do teleradiology till I have money, and then I go back to my OBL. I left my job, transition in life, things happen. I'll read on the side, then till I find the next job. That stuff is definitely a lucrative, and it's It's something that, like a situation that you just do not see in other specialty. I totally agree with you, Mark. But it's a hindrance. It's hindering us.
Well, it's hindering the specialty, right? Like it's hindering the growth, not the individual radiologist. It's like awesome for the individual radiologist, but like just totally crushing our ability as a specialty.
So funny, so you say that there was a survey that was sent to trainees and members about, IR alone, IRDR, and all this stuff. More than 2/3 said, definitely keep the DR. Even trainees, even the ones who did IR, DR, went into the integrated IR, gung-ho, matched out of medical school. Because why not? Why not? I'm already in it. The question is this better for us 10, 15 years down the road? Are we losing, the next group of excellent students who go into, vascular surgery, ENT, urology, GI, I don't know about GI, but anyways, what I mean. But that are we losing, and they could come to our specialty. And if they come to our specialty, they'll be the one who are going to be pushing for my clinic and such. That's, again, it's theory. And again, everyone says, well, prove it to me. Let's survey our residents. And, our residents will say, no, of course, we want to keep both because I'm already, knee deep in it. I'm in my, third year of DR. I'm not gonna lose this. And think about this. It's going to be coming soon. And, when this podcast comes out, we're going to be looking at what the ABR decides on the new oral boards, right? The DR people now, the DR graduates are going to sit for oral boards back in the day. You remember that, Mark? Ali, did you sit for oral boards? Of course you did. Oh, come on.
No, I was a Prometheus Lionheart generation.
Hey, yeah. Yes. So, oral boards is coming back for DR. So it's going to have from IR. You're going to get a DR certificate by just sitting for your IR board in the core? Of course not. DR, everyone is talking about it now. APDR is pushing, and everyone is pushing to have a significant DR component to the IR exam. So we'll see what the ABR decides, but I would not be shocked if they add, whether it's an oral or written, an additional written or something added. So people have to sit for 2 exams to be IR certified, right? To be IRDR certified. And my views on this is at some point, I don't know when, I hope it's in my lifetime, that as an interventional radiologist, not me living, but, meaning over the next 20 years or so, we manage to create an option for an IR-only specialty, that you do not have a DR portion of your certificate. You get trained in DR for a couple of years or so to be good in DR, but then you end up with an IR certificate. And then that's what you're going to practice. You practice IR because that's the only certificate you have. You can maybe do diagnostic, vascular imaging as part of it, but that's my dream, that would be the thing that could eventually help us down the road. Now, some people say, I don't want to ever do this. There should be an option for an IRDR like MedPeds and something like this, or MedPsych. And there's a DR component. A DR, of course, the people who want to do DR only. But I think for our specialty to move forward, this is what we need to go at some point. Now, I don't know, Ali, if your time comes back and you're out of medical school, which option would you choose? Now you've known yourself how good of a DR you can be. Probably you'll say, I'll probably stick with an IRDR. But I don't know. I know what I would choose. I would say I'm just going to do an IR only.
If the jobs existed, yeah. If there were 100% IR jobs for the amount of IR graduates that you send out, then yeah, that sounds great. But we're just not going to be there anytime soon. That's not what the U.S. needs right now. You need people who can do both.
But I would ask, you're special. You're in a leadership position. You're clearly, you have a very special career. How many IRs say that they feel, this concept of tribalism, right? We live in the United States, so we know a lot about it. How many IRs feel like, I want to dedicate my life to the growth of my specialty at the expense of my pocketbook? And I think that's the problem. I think in a vacuum, a lot of IRs will say, of course, I want a high-end specialty. I want to do all these crazy things. I want to do tips. I want to do everything. But when push comes to shove, I don't care what that number is. It could be, as an IR only, I'm making $3 million. If as an IRDR, I can make $3,500,000, I think a lot of people are like, well, for the extra $500, I might as well keep DR. That's an exaggeration, but we are asking people, because I agree with you, we are asking people to say, put specialty above self. We can't put country above self in this. We can't put anything above self. And so self dominates everything. And I know that sounds like really cynical because most IRs I've trained and most IRs I know are passionate about the specialty and great clinicians. But how do you overcome that hump of, but it may be a little bit harder, you make a little less money for the good of the specialty and not hear, you know what, I'm good.
I feel like you don't need to be too paternal. Like you don't want to like tell people what to, like, this is how you're going to practice. That's why I think, again, this is a personal opinion. I mean, this is not something that, this is something on, SIR's banner or something. I can tell you what, I've been in this for a while once the IR residency started. So I get to my personal opinion, and that's something I could try to push for, and avenue I can is no, I mean, give people the option, to do an IRDR or do IR only. I know few, that would definitely choose for, out of a group of, like, I would say, again, I just take the people that we trained as a group for over 2 institutions. I see a good, maybe 20, 30%, maybe 15%, I don't know, who would say, no, I would just do an IR because that's what they're doing now, actually. So you can see this. Why not give these people an avenue? These could be trailblazers who can build stuff, who can then eventually not be hampered by the potential of a DR certificate that they have to do this to read the imaging as part of it. It's like in IR only. Now, can you not be marketable? I understand that maybe they can form an IR only group and then grow that practice. Again, we are not unique in this. Vascular surgery did it. They have the 0+5. They just not trained in general surgery. They're just vascular surgeons. Are they the jobs for them and such? They could create the job. I can tell you from our experience in our community hospitals, we have, 10 hospitals in our system. One of our hospitals was mostly somebody who did IRDR and did few lines and, few, pain management stuff and a couple of, emergencies here and there. That was the practice. Then I convinced one of our graduates to go there, and it's I would consider rural. It's like an hour and a half from DC. And he built a phenomenal practice. He is the highest, producer of our entire 23 IR group. You can't keep up. It's like prostates, fibroids, and all the interceptant spine jack and knees and P. Now they have like the biggest PE practices there. You just put somebody who wants to do this stuff in one room, and then when the hospital sees that, and it's like, oh, great, let's give you another room. Let's give you another NP and all this stuff. You all hear the success stories. This stuff exists. These jobs exist. We always have ads for people, to come and interview. And then I interview a bunch of people for a job that's 100% well-resourced. Not academics. You don't need to teach. Just come and do 100% IR with a clinic and everything, right? And then you interview 10 people, you find that 8 of them took jobs with DR, heavy DR practice. Like, I'm surprised. So are the jobs there? The jobs are there. I think they are there. If you want to do passion on IR, you can join academics and be in the community practice and academics or in the academic department, but not do a lot of academics. That's dwindling down anyways. And then later on, forge your path and go build your own practice afterwards. All right, I'll push back that the practices are not there. I think they are there. But as Mark said, it's much easier to go through the other path.
They're like in the employed position that you talk about. I don't know that they're really there in the IRDR groups.
Correct.
With you being the exception, Mark.
You're correct. No, and I
many.
appreciate that. Not only that, but once you start restricting things like, look, my wife is from Philadelphia. I have to be in the Philadelphia area, or I have to be in Iowa. Now you're starting to get into trouble, right? So it's not just like, yeah, I could join a great group in DC, but no, I have to be in Kentucky. Now it's different. The other thing I would say is, what do you say to someone who says, I chose the IR pathway, IR only, and then I got in an accident and my hands don't work. I'm paralyzed now. If only I had that backup.
I know, I hear you. Same thing that happened to the vascular surgeon who did a 0+5 and they cannot do this now. They're going to have to change their career. These things happen. And I know it's unfortunate, but it's not unique to us. Plastic surgery does it and vascular surgery does it and all this stuff.
But they don't have another option, right? So the surgeons are trained as, even if they trained in the old system, they still couldn't be general surgeons, but we have this option of completely abandoning our specialty and doing something completely different with just our mind.
Yes. I hear you. I know there could be an option. I don't know, I'm not going to go into ABR and certification thing, but you can, if you do this part, you can potentially down the road go and do initial training for a year or two, then sit for a DR exam. That's something could happen, could be a backup because you're already trained in it some. Again, this is just a pie in the sky, like thinking why are we stuck in this situation? It's because of certificate. And what is the way to get out of it is to have a separate certificate. that's the way. Now, in between now and then, what do we do?
So one thing you could really do to help is really focus on a couple things. Not all IRs are created equal. So a lot of hospitals say, oh yeah, we have an IR. Oh yeah, he doesn't do any vascular. vascular cases, like meaning he doesn't stick an artery. So like is that the same person as like the person doing emergent tips on the weekend? No. Like those are two different. So yeah, like establishing what does it mean to be an IR? Back to Mark's original question. What like base qualifications do you need to have to be an IR? And then like show the value of high quality IR to hospitals. Show it in decreased length of stays and increased patient satisfaction and all the stuff that those like annoying administrative people care about. Like, but from the SIR level, pushing it and showing that it makes a difference to have high quality IR, then the IRs in the community will feel like they have a little bit more support.
This is perfect, Ali, and perfect segue. So I'll tell you what SIR is doing on this. I mean, this is very important because SR leadership, whoever it comes. I was not in SR leader a few years ago, and I am. Mark was not. Now he is. So it's the members. It's not like some people that came from a spaceship and came and be. They are the members. They are part of the community, and they listen and see what's going on, and they talk to all their colleagues and trainees. So I would say that few things. One thing that we put together now a study commission. The reason for it is because of the divergence in practice between and whether it's workflow or business model or business goals of IRs and DRs, we put this study commission to study what does the future hold and what should be the best path forward to support the specialty as a clinical specialty. So that was going to have a lot of members, be part of it, in addition to some stakeholders, and be some surveys and meetings and such. And then we'll come with this very strong recommendation that be part of strategic plan that will roll over the next years. So that is something that is important. Other specialties have done it. We need to define the specialty. We need to safeguard the specialty, and we need to forge a path for growth for our members who are out there fending for themselves. I totally agree. I think that would be that step. One other thing is we're working with ACR, believe it or not. And, there's a lot of leaders in ACR who in IR by training, and which is great. So we're actually working with them on a big project on exactly what you just mentioned, on the value of IR in the community and how can having a clinical practice with clinic benefit the hospital group or the DR group. So the value of having a clinical IR and how does that translate into revenue, not just professional satisfaction. So there's a lot of work being done on this, and again, working with ACR, Neiman Institute, and some others. And I think it looks very promising. And as part of it is you look at who's IR and who's not IR, and there's a lot of these studies that have been done again by SIR and several its health economic division, and looking at it and see based on what you bill and what percentage and such, and you'll see we have a lot in the 90% and a lot in the 10%, and then everywhere in between. So if you exclude the one in the 10%, most of them are not practicing. But if you include everybody else, that's how we kind of try to figure out who is practicing IR. So I think that would be these will be the next things to do, these tangible steps that we can, of course, they take time to kind of, get and publish and survey and all that stuff. But these are some of the things that we feel are moving forward. And then you try to recruit someone like Mark Lessne to be a private practice counselor is going to solve everything for us. So I would like to hear from him.
We got this guy, not sure. He's got
What's his vision?
It's interesting. As I hear us talk, and I don't know that I've made this connection before, because I do the same thing. I make this argument of, should IR be with DR or should we separate and give up our skill set? And I realize that it's not necessarily a binary choice. In other words, you can have IRs keep their DR skill set, but not be part of an IR-DR group or not be part of DR. And what I mean by that is, again, having zero, I don't have a crystal ball, I'm not an expert at business or future healthcare predictions. However, what I see from personal experience is the diagnostic radiologists tend to be becoming more and more virtual, and the interventionalists are more and more becoming the only people in the hospital. And so I wonder if there is going to be a point where the hospital says, hang on, we clearly need the IRs here because they're physically present. But why would I sort of use this private group or a private equity company, VC, as a middleman when I can just, hire the IRs and either keep the same contract I have for the DRs or maybe do a teleradiology. I mean, you're mostly teleradiology anyway. And so, you could have a situation where the IR still had their DR and they could say to the hospital, look, I'm happy to be contracted with you, but I don't want to give them my DR privileges, and use it as a backup, but not be part of that practice. And I predict that that may not be a choice of DR or IR. I think it's going to be a choice of the natural progression of healthcare. At some point, I don't see the hospitals continuing these contracts with diagnostic radiologists who are increasingly home when they have other options, right? I mean, I could hire someone pay-per-click who lives in California, maybe less expensive, or Oregon or something. And so I think there is a way to sort of bridge that gap and say, look, here's my definition of an IR. It doesn't mean you have to give up DR, but if you're 90% DR, that's probably not where we're going to put our resources as a society. I know that is not the most mature vision, but that's sort of the glimpses I'm starting to see.
And then, as you see the relationship with IRDR, there's a lot of details, right? If you look at the hospital setting, which a lot of people who are listening who don't want to hear about it in general, but there are a lot of discussions about what's the best position for IR to be in a hospital setting from a service line. Whether it's an academic center or a health-based, just any other health system, sometimes from a workflow perspective, you probably better be under peri-op. It could be under the cardiovascular institute. It could be under the outside OR procedural area. These are all could be options. And we've seen it, again, at the last ACIR, we've heard from a lot of, people who've been trailblazers who've done, a department of IR, separate from radiology, but that's not unique to this is not unique to academic centers. We're going to see this more and more frequent in health systems where there could be a IR service line that fits better under a different location other than DR, just based on whether it's supplies, whether it's, the way the billing is and it just the clinic and the nursing, and such, it just fits better that way. So again, everything is local. Whatever works best for you to get, and whenever people ask about it, it's like, yeah, you could separate, but right now I'm getting a lot of benefit from being under radiology for certain things, equipment and such. Maybe at some point may not be the best option for me. So, it's something that, I think evolving, and there's no right or wrong answer saying, yeah, you should separate now or, today or tomorrow, but it's something that I think will probably evolve to in the future as we see these different service lines form and such.
Let me turn this around. What are your impressions, the two of you? Does diagnostic radiology think we should separate? What do they think?
Yeah, they hate us. They pretty much think we sit in the hospital and do 10 paracentesis and get paid and read 40 chest x-rays and get the same money as them cranking. Yeah, so that's the general view of diagnostic. And I think for a long time, everyone was oh, IR keeps the hospital contract. That's why we have to have IRs, even though we subsidize them. But now, because the diagnostic lists are getting so backed up and you can't even hire teleradiologists unless you have insane amounts of money, they're oh, well, this is our chance to basically just split off of IR. So I have a feeling a lot of them are very pro ditching IR too, because we're basically seen as dead weight for them. And now they don't really need IR to keep the hospital contract because they can't, a hospital can't hire VRAD or teleradiology to come do all the DR stuff. So, you guys are obviously privileged. You're in these leadership positions. You have crazy awesome practices, but I can tell that you really want to appeal to the average Joe Schmo interventional radiologist, such as myself or my colleagues who, are part of SIR, or maybe were part of SIR, but now don't feel like it speaks for them anymore. And you're really interested in kind of making it the society for the people. That's pretty refreshing. So thanks.
That was so well said. We should put that on the banner. Society for the people.
Society for the people. I love it.
I love it. But it's funny, in my application for the SIR leadership position, one of the things I wanted to do was talk to the people, because I won't even pretend to understand what a practice is like that I'm not part of, right? I've been part of an academic center, and I've been part of a very large, private group that's like an academic center. I don't know what it's like to be part of a 5-person group or 10-person group, or have a diagnostic radiologist who's just not supportive at all and is you just read, shut up and read. I've never been part of that. So I think I would like to hear from those people and learn from them. And maybe and I know SIR and has been doing that for years, so I don't mean to imply they haven't, but I think more data of what are your pain points and what do you think we could be doing better is a good place to start, rather than just the, hearing from the OBLs about, pseudo-exclusive contracts and things like that. We kind of have a grasp of that. What are the other things that we're missing?
Yeah, I mean, and I really truly think, this is society for the people. Again, in a couple of years, you'll be done with me. I'm not going to be, part of leadership, and, Mark will rotate off and so on and so forth. And the society does not belong to a group of people. It's open for whoever wants to apply. I'm sure some people are going to say, yeah, there's academic bias and all this stuff and, all these things. But it starts from being a member. I know a lot of people decide not to be a member, which is an issue. That's just, again, saying, yeah, I don't want to do the heavy lifting on building an IR practice, or things are just not working. I'm just not going to be a member anymore because I say I haven't done it for me. I'm always of the opinion as, you don't walk away, you just, dig in and try to see how you can help. So I think, being part of the membership and trying to kind of, join committees and join, there's a lot of opportunities for volunteers and to go in and see what can be done. And it's open for everybody. I think truly SIR has an issue with not having enough from the private practice, be in leadership position. A lot of it has to do a lot of time commitment. It is time commitment. You just have to spend a lot of time. Well, again, if you care about the specialty, this is where you just do something now to try to kind of help the future and help yourself and help the future. So I think there's opportunities. I think the door is open literally for everybody. We'd love to see more, volunteers from different practice patterns, because we need everyone's input. And there's a lot of success stories of people who came from different private practice. Again, like Mary Constantine is one of them who, went into the OBL world, and she's just running a business institute now with Al Hoffman. And this has been a very valuable thing that she brought to SIR, being a counselor, and many others. So, these things matter. And I think you can, and I would encourage everybody not to minimize what you can do to your specialty. And, this is the avenue to do it through SIR. I'm sure there's some other ways you can contribute to, by, hosting podcasts, for example, that is very helpful, which, is probably has the most reach and impact. That's why we are here, because of the reach and impact that you guys have.
I thought it was because you liked me, Saher.
I love talking to you all the time, of course. So the best fellow to ever, to be ever trained. So, yeah. So, I think there are a lot of ways you can contribute and help. And I would love to see people who are vocal on different avenues to try. I know some say we tried and failed, to try again, try to get into, volunteerism and such. And, you're not going to jump to the top from the beginning, but you have to kind of work your way through and have some impact. And I would say the door is open. On behalf of SIR, the door is open. I would love to. And if people would reach out to me directly and say, I would like to be involved, I don't know how to be involved, I'll try to be involved, or I was turned down, I'll be more than happy to sit and talk with you and discuss this and see how you can be involved if you truly genuinely want to help the specialty.
So to dovetail to that, I will say this SIR, Ali said, how can we represent SIR members and non-SIR members? In other words, there's a lot of people who aren't part of SIR. Why? So it's not free. It's a purchase. And so just like any purchase you make, we have to make sure that we add value, because I think a lot of the feedback we get from non-SAR members that I've spoken personally is, why on earth am I paying $700, $800, $900, $1,000? I don't get anything. I'm not going to burn $1,000. And this idea of sort of pride in your specialty, well, I think most of us feel it. It's not worth $800 to feel pride. I feel pride without the $800. And so I think showing not only value of an IR, showing value of SIR, which, again, SIR is so good at, but obviously there's room for more. Just to hedge a little bit, because I am diagnostic radiology trained, to hedge, I will say the flip side is, you cannot sit back and complain. SIR doesn't do anything for me. They don't know anything about me. My practice is different. They only cater to academics. If you don't tell anyone, if you don't talk to SIR and say, hey, by the way, do you know you're not doing anything for me? And I would love for you to do X, Y, and Z. So I see it both ways. I see it from SIR, having to do more to reach these people and show value for the money. But also, it is incumbent upon you to show your specialty how we can help you. Because if you don't, it's like I tell my kids, right? You're welcome to complain, but it's got to come with a solution. You can't just complain. Otherwise, you're not moving the ball forward. And
Does that work? Do your kids actually listen to that? That's amazing.
Kids.
I've got. I know they're very.
We
they're very
just play
strapped.
and joke around. That's kind of no. That's
No, we must have
we get.
discipline. Discipline. Yeah, it's like this attitude into adulthood is the same as we all had in kids, and I think problem solving is one of things IRs do best. We're the MacGyver's specialty, right? And so help us problem solve, right? Come to us. Your ideas are great, regardless of your practice.
It all comes back to what we were originally talking about, which is like we have an identity crisis, and we've had one for a long time, and it's got lots of different little pieces and components, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
No, and I know this is out of order, but one thing I wanted to ask is, do you all know the history of radiation oncology? Like, because I don't, but is there anything we can learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. Yeah, I mean, they were part. I mean, they're still part of the ABR, by the way. So when they're bored and all the stuff, they're still part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it evolved little by little, and it just separated slowly. Then eventually, went separate ways. But it was not like a one day saying let's go. I mean, it took a while, and it was multiple steps before they eventually had the separation. Listen, I have no doubt in my mind that at some point it's going to happen. There'll be more separation. We are, again, we used this term before. We are so divergent in our workflow, our goals, the way we practice medicine. If you think of yourself, Mark or Ali, sitting on a shift of a diagnostic shift or in a clinic or doing procedures all day, all right? I mean, think about these. It's just so different. It's just like as if you're, in a different world, and we're divergent. I mean, the way the hospital looks at it, the way, other specialties look at it, the way you look at yourself of what your goal is, what you roll into the scheme of things. I'm just going to dictate this. I want to make sure, I want to hedge it. I want to make sure that to call them, let them know they can deal with it. You, on the other hand, you have to actually fix the problem because it's your patient. You have to follow the bleed that you just created. So it's just completely different. So it just naturally it's gonna eventually separate. I truly think we live in a time, I don't know how long it's gonna take, that this is gonna be the birth of a new specialty that's gonna take some time. I'll have to be very thoughtful about it, and we have to make sure that there's enough critical mass of people who think the same way. That's gonna happen. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. Right now, this is the worst time because of how lucrative DR is. Like, this is the worst time to have this discussion. Like, you start talking to people, it's like, what do you mean? I just did these couple of shifts and made, I don't know how many $1,000, So you cannot even, this is the worst time to discuss it. I think once the DR virtual bubble is going to burst, which we know at some point, there's nothing keeps going up. I mean, it's going to burst at some point. It may take some time, and we've all been enough with the residency and training, all the stuff. We've seen the match and all the stuff go up and down, with the market go up and down. I remember the time when we were residents, they're paying them $50,000, in their third year to sign a contract. And then, 5-6 days later, you kind of find a job coming out of training. It just like goes in such, it's going to happen again. Right now, it's at a peak, and there's shortage of diagnostic radiologists. It's going to fix itself at some point, and it's not going to be as lucrative to do that for DR. And you got to now think like, did I lose my R skills? Go back to what my mentor said. Did you lose a skill you worked so hard to achieve by jumping on a shiny object of teleradiology now that could last you? Who knows? It may last forever. I wish best for everybody who makes these life choices, but it's something that I think is gonna eventually change. So that's why I encourage everybody to just keep your skills. Don't abandon what you work so hard to accomplish.
It's much, much easier to commoditize diagnostic radiology than interventional radiology. Once you become a commodity, that's it. Game over.
That's very well said.
I think what you said probably more eloquently than what I said, what I was trying to say is, I don't think the discussion has to be, does DR have to separate and therefore IR loses their DR skills? And maybe the way we think about it is that graph you were talking, I give a talk on practice building, and I have that exact graph, Saher, where it shows the percentage of IR that someone practices. And you have a spike at 10%, you have a spike at 90%, and most people are sort of in the middle, right? And so for me, separating from IR, DR, the people who are doing the 80%, 90%, 100% IR, those aren't the people I'm worried about. The people that I think we need to address are the other half of that. And I think the way you said it and what Ali just said was very good, which is we talk all this time about losing your DR skill set. But if you're at that 50, 60% IR only mark, you are at high risk of losing your IR skill set, right? And if that bubble does burst And IR now all of a sudden is not the commoditized specialty. IR is the specialty that actually is a little bit more wanted. You've lost a skill set that you worked hard to get. And so I don't necessarily think we need to tell the 80, 90, 100% IR or 99% IRs, get rid of diagnostic, forget your diagnostic. I think it's more concentrating on our efforts on the 60 and below or whatever arbitrary number you want to pick is saying, hey, that's not probably where you want to live. And I don't know that that is paternalistic if we send a message out correctly and appropriately, which is hard.
We're even asking them like, okay, you're at like 50, 60. Do you want to be more? Like, is your goal to be more, but external factors are pushing you to be 50? And what can we do to help you to get there? That's who you need to reach. Yeah.
Absolutely. And people want answers, right? Like, okay, what if I am disabled? What if I'm tired? What if my back hurts? And so the answer is diagnostic. Well, the truth is, no, there's veins, there's pain. There's a lot of procedures but I don't think people think about that as much. And this is a message we could send too. Here are the IR alternatives for when you're tired, for when your back hurts, for when you have a slipped disc, for when you're, 70 or 65 or whatever. We need to send that message out because everyone right now just says, I'm going to read. But SIR should say, well, here's some other options to keep within our specialty.
Eventually, it's all the lobbying that happens. You have to come from a specialty, right? I mean, so you need your specialty to lobby for you. And to get a lot of the codes, like, next time now you do any ultrasound guided access, the only reason you got that code is because SIR, Health and Economic Division, worked hard to get that in. Without it, it's not going to happen. Thyroid ablation code, the surgeons wanted to do the procedure. It was not lucrative. They left it alone. SIR picked it up and then got the code. Now the surgeons want it back on to learn how to do the lower procedure. My point is, when I get paid for the work you do and lobby, government, I would say this value, there's a lot of things, education, conferences, and all this stuff. This particular one is super unique to a specialty, your own specialty, right? It's not going to happen from others. And to prove that something works or not, there's these trials that is done, the foundation helps and all this stuff to get you to the level that you need to. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about, but I would say if you just care about something, about getting paid for the work you do, you need to really work with your specialty to get you to this level. And that is a lot of work happens for SIR. So that's what I think it's very important to be aware of it. And again, if you go to a revenue cycle meeting, management meeting, go into the business institute, you learn about all these things. And you learn that it's just not an RV that, again, just descends from heaven. It's something that is so much hard work goes in the RUC committees and all these volunteers that work just to be able to, in the surveys, just to be able to get you paid for what you do.
We're not supposed to talk politics here, but you know how people routinely will vote for someone or a candidate that represents issues that are counter to what benefits them, right? So, you talk about Obamacare and people are like, I hate Obamacare. But then if you pull them individually on the aspects of Obamacare, they're like, but don't say it Obamacare. They say, oh, that's great. That's what I need. It's all in the messaging, right? And so I think what you're saying about what SIR does, of course, we know it. I've been an SIR member since I graduated or before when I was a resident, and I've been involved. But I don't know how to reach the person who everything you said, they don't know about, or they don't care about, or they don't appreciate that SIR actually did that. I think it's the messaging of how did this affect you? And that's where we have to reach people. Not only just telling them we lobby, but also, here's how if it's come to our business meeting, 99% of them aren't going to do that, right? And so, and again, I just gave you a problem and I don't have a solution. So I violated my own rule.
Well, cool, guys. Gonna kind of wrap up our discussion. Any parting words that you have for our audience about whether we should stay or should we go? Saher, let's start with you.
Again, I think on the long run, we're headed towards separation just because of we are such distinct specialties. The timing of that is still to be determined. You're going to see pockets of separation is going to happen, whether it's local institutions, hospitals, certain practices. I think eventually to have true separation, it's going to have to come into the training of the certification. Once that happens, that's when it officially announced that we are separate. So till we get to that level, we're still going to be tied. We'll get there. We'll get there at some point. I do not believe that they should definitely be a complete separation and never looking back. There's some people who are going to want to practice both at some point. and have that ability. And you don't want to discount that. I think keep that as an option. But for the growth of the specialty, we need a critical mass of interventional radiologists who practice full clinical practice, IR practice, with longitudinal care, with referrals, and they are the ones who are going to carry the specialty forward. And to do that, we need definite separation from DR and our own certificate.
Any wise words of wisdom, Mark, before we stop?
I have words. I don't know if they're wise. So I think the leadership of SIR should have guidelines as to what it means to be an interventionalist. I think that is within the realm of appropriate. I suspect the separation is not going to come from a mandate or a dictum from SIR. I think it's going to be an organic growth where at a local level, just like we were talking about, groups are going to say, you know what, we're different specialties. This isn't working. And it's going to come not from IR or just DR, it's going to come from both. Or it's going to come from the hospital, or it's going to come from the private equity group that runs them. It's like, why do we bother with X when we can only, bother with Y? And I think that is going to be a change from within. And it's almost like a revolution, not to be too dramatic, but I think the people or the entities are going to decide, and then the leadership is going to be there to support. But I don't think SIR or ABR or ACR is going to say, oh, we're separate. It's going to be an internal growth and change that's dictated by local politics, and local becomes citywide, citywide becomes statewide, statewide becomes regional wide, and so forth and so on.
Awesome.
Organic separation.
Organic separation.
Over an undefined period of time.
Yeah. And the last plug I'll say is, looking at the people to my left and right, Saher and Ali, use them as inspiration for people listening to this. You don't have to run your own podcast. You don't have to be president of SIR. But geez, it would be cool if you took an hour once every 7 months and sent an email to Saher or SIR leadership or Ali and said, hey, this is my problem. Here's what's going on. I'd love for SIR to work on it. Because I think getting your voice out there is the most critical. And you see people who are dedicating immense amount of time and effort. And you know what? They're busy. They're just as busy as any of us. So take that as inspiration and shape your specialty 1 hour at a time, I think goes a long way.
Thank you guys for coming on the show. I was worried about this topic because I thought it might be too controversial, I think we talked about some interesting stuff.
Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and follow, rate the show 5 stars, and share with a friend. If you have any questions or comments, direct message us at _BackTable on Instagram, LinkedIn, X, TikTok, or Blue Sky. BackTable is produced and hosted by myself, Aaron Fritz, and co-hosts
Chris Beck, Sabine Dawn,
Michael Barraza,
and Ali Baheti.
Our production team is led by Kieran Gannon,
Aaron Bowles,
Gabe D'Agrazio,
and Josh Spencer.
Design and digital marketing led by Brian Schmitz.
Social media and PR by Ann Dang,
Manisha Naganathanahali,
and Manbir Singh Sandhu.
Administrative support provided by Judy Dela Cruz.
Thanks again. See you next time.